Hi everyone, welcome to the part 2 of our discussion for your molecular biology and diagnostics modules 10 to 12. So for the part 1, na-discuss na natin yung review of your periodic examination as well as the first part kung saan natakil natin yung basic genetics, also the DNA repair. So for the part 2, continuation lang of our basic genetics. Alam ko naman na alam nyo na to kasi you have your cytogenetics with Ma'am Snowy. So ito, review na lang po and i-connect natin siya to our molecular biology. Okay, for your genetics, again, kung meron man tayong isang tao na hindi dapat kalimutan sa genetics natin, and that is Mr. Gregor Johann Mendel. Again, Gregor Johann Mendel, natatandaan ba sa ating first part or the modules 1 to 2, I think, wherein nabanggit natin si Mr. Gregor Mendel na kung saan he was able to detect yung mga parang pairings when it comes to the genetics, yung pairings, yung sa mga Punnett square, ganyan, paano na-connect using your P's. So he is the father of genetics. Again, wag na wag pong kalilimutan si Mr. Gregor Mendel. He is the father of the genetics. His principle of independent assortment, it is the inheritance of one trait that has no effect on the inheritance of another trait. Again, the traits are determined by the genes on the chromosomes. Again, genes are parts of the chromosome. A gene is a segment. Segment lamang po siya ng DNA that determines the trait. Again, hindi po synonymous si genes kay chromosomes at kay DNA. Magkakaiba po sila ng meaning. However, si genes is a part or a segment of your DNA. Okay, kung titingnan natin dito sa picture natin, parang segment by segment lang siya of a DNA. Hindi po sila magkakapareho. Okay? So your chromosomes come in homologous pair. Homologous meaning they are identical. Thus, genes comes in pairs. So homologous pairs, they are matching, they are identical, they are the same. One from female parent and one from your male parent. So meron nga kaming biruan ng mga professors dito na kapag sinabi na nung simula, nung nag-aral tayo ng cytogenetics and ng molecular biology, mas cautious na tayo kung sino yung gusto nating maging parent or maging partner natin. Kasi isipin mo ha, yung 23 pairs ng chromosomes mo, ng genes mo, galing sa partner mo. Tapos yung 23 pairs sa'yo. So gusto mo, yung anak mo, di ba, maka-inherit naman ng magandang genes. So yun yung mga parang biruan lang. Example, humans have 46 chromosomes. We have 46 and 23 pairs po sila. The one set, yung 23 doon, galing sa sperm ng iyong father, and then the 23 coming from the egg of your mother. So be very cautious sa pagpili ng partner kasi tandaan, doon sa partner mo mai-inherit no magiging anak mo yung 23 sets ng kanyang chromosomes. Okay? And hindi pa, ang catch doon, hindi mo pa sure kung yung genes or yung makukuha ba na 23 sets na yun yung good traits ba or yung good genes ng partner na pipiliin mo. Okay? Parang competition pa ng sperm yun. Next, one pair of homologous chromosomes, the gene for the eye color, and then the gene for the eye color of brown, and then the blue. And then it comes in homologous pair of your chromosomes. Alleles, nabanggit na natin si alleles. It is the different genes or possibilities for the same trait. It can be blue eyes or brown eyes. Either you inherit the blue eyes coming from your father or the brown eyes coming from your mother or vice versa. The dominant and recessive genes that prevents the other genes from showing dominant. Again, yung dominant and recessive, nabanggit na for cytogenetics, it is the gene that prevents the other gene from showing dominant or dominance. Gene that does not show, even though it is present, yun yung tinatawag nating recessive. Kapag ka naman yung gene na nag-prevent from the other gene from showing dominant. Okay, parang nandun na siya, coming from the word, di ba? Parang yun na yung kanyang English equivalents. The symbol for the dominant gene, pag dominant gene, uppercase. Lagi. Okay, dominant nga po. Pag recessive naman, small letter. Okay. So ito parang lang naman to. Mga examples lang on how you will determine if it is dominant or it is recessive. And then it must have two recessive alleles for a recessive to show, for a recessive trait to show. Again, it must have 2 recessive alleles to receive a trait to show. So for example, both genes of a pair are the same. Homozygous or purebred. Kapag ka-dominant, again, homozygous dominant, dapat dalawang uppercase, letter T. For example, yung gagamitin nating alphabet letter. Tapos naman, homozygous recessive, dapat ang gagamitin natin dalawang small letter T. So, one dominant and one recessive gene, heterozygous or hybrid, di ba? Heterozygous, coming from our definition of terms or hybrid. Yan. Pag T, pag may capital T, may small letter T, heterozygous yan. So ito, parang kagaya nitong sa ating black na dog. So pag dalawang letter B, black, kung ano, ang parents niya, dalawang black na puppy or dalawang black dogs. So it will manifest. Okay, magbo-black siya. So kung yung isa naman, yung tatay nitong dog na to is black, pero yung nanay niya white genes, di ba? It will manifest. Kung mas dominant, yung sa tatay, the baby dog or the puppy dog will manifest the black color. Pero, meron siyang he or that dog contains the white genes. However, dito naman recessive, dalawang small letter T, kung mapapansin, it will manifest the white color. Kasi nga, recessive yung mas dominant. Mas nag-dominate, sorry. So this is the genotype and the phenotype. It is the combination of genes an organism has the actual gene makeup. It is what we call the genotype. Okay? And then the physical appearance resulting from gene makeup is what we call the phenotype. So magkaiba sa genotype from your phenotype. Again, genotype, it is the combination of genes of an organism. Yun yung actual gene makeup natin. Ito yun, yung autosomal recessive, dominant, ganyan. Pero pag sinabing phenotype, diba, it is the resulting from gene makeup. Yun yung phenotype natin. Yung nag-manifest na yung physical appearance. Kung blue eyes, red eyes, brown eyes. May red eyes ba? Wala namang red eyes. Okay? Yun yung difference ni genotype from your phenotype. Ito yan, genotype yung mga yan. Pero pag phenotype, ito na. Okay? Magmamanifest na yung physical appearance. So, the Punnett square, hindi na natin to masyadong i-elaborate kasi na-discuss na to for cytogenetics. Maganda lang na alam natin yung relevance niya and then yung connection for the genetics and then the connection sa ating molecular biology and the genetic disorders, kung bakit sila ganun. So, daanan lang natin ng very good. So, sex-linked traits, as you all know, it is the genes for these traits are located only at the X chromosome, not in the Y chromosome. Pakitandaan po ito ng maigi. Pag sinabing sex-linked traits, genes for these traits are located only in the X chromosome. X chromosomes lang po. Okay? X-linked alleles always show up in males, whether recessive or dominant, because males only have one chromosome. Na-discuss natin yan sa ating previous slide wherein sa female, hindi masyadong naapektuhan ng mga genetic disorders. Usually, mga carrier lang tayo. Kasi the effect of mutation may be masked by the second healthy copy of the other chromosome. Sa lalaki kasi, wala nang pagkakataon para ma-mask up ng isa pang X chromosome kasi X and Y sila. Tayo mga female, X and X tayo. So meron pa tayong isa pang parang reserba na chromosome na pwedeng magtama kung meron mang something wrong with the other X chromosome. Parang ganun yung kanyang principle. Okay, the examples of recessive sex-linked disorders, mapapansin nyo yung mga colorblind, usually sa mga lalaki nagmamanifest ang pagiging colorblind. Okay, color blindness is the inability to distinguish between certain colors and usually mga nagmamanifest po talaga nito mga lalaki. Wala pa akong nababalita ang females na nagmamanifest ng color blindness kasi as we all know, we are only carriers. Next is the hemophilia, wherein the blood won't clot. Usually, ganitong nangyayari. So si father, he does not have hemophilia. He has a normal copy of the gene. And then the mother is the carrier of the hemophilia, one copy of hemophilia gene. So example, yung isang gene na to, meron siyang hemophilia gene coming from their ancestors. So nung nagkaroon sa kanila sila ng mga offspring, let's say nagkaroon siya ng 2 daughters and 2 sons. So makikita natin sa ating diagram. Start muna tayo sa left side. So daughter does not have the hemophilia and then inherited the normal copies of the gene. So na-inherit niya yung normal copy Yung normal copy. Okay, swerte. And then the other daughter, let's say na she is the carrier of the hemophilia, nakuha niya yung healthy nung tatay, 23 pairs, pero nakuha niya yung isang copy, yung isang carrier hemophilia, yung isang genes. So, this daughter won't manifest the signs and symptoms of the hemophilia kasi meron pa siyang backup na healthy chromosome galing dun sa tatay. Okay? Next, yung son naman, yung first son, he does not have the hemophilia. He possesses the normal copies of the gene. For example, nanggaling yung X na to sa tatay, maswerte siya. Although may Y siya, o, diba? Wala namang nangyaring masama sa kanya kasi nga nakuha niya sa tatay. Eh what if naman yung pinakamailas na bata? Yung meron siyang hemophilia kasi yung kanyang hemophilia gene hinakuha niya sa nanay niya. Eh, Y chromosome siya. So, ang inherit niya yung sa nanay, malas niya. Ito, maswerte pa kasi nakuha niya yung nasa tatay. So, ganun po siya. Maswerte yung mga girls kasi we have 2 X chromosomes. The other X chromosome can mask up the wrong happenings dun sa other X chromosomes. So, mga males, wala na silang pagkakataon. Malas nila pag nakuha yung hemophilia genes coming from the mother. Yun, ganun siya. So moving forward to our genetic disorders, we won't elaborate that much the chromosomes kasi mas maganda siyang i-discuss ng tuloy-tuloy for the modules 14 to 15. Tama ba ako? 10 to 12. 13 to 14. Sorry, 13 to 14. So, pahapiyaw lang po ng genetic disorders to. Promise, hindi po siya kasama sa inyong quiz. Promise. Pagka kasama sa quiz to, yari si ma'am. Okay? So, the genetic disorders, the causes are all result of a mutation in the genetic code. Again, the genetic disorders, these are all a result of a mutation in the genetic code. Genetic, ibig sabihin namamana, it can be inherited, but it is not infectious and hindi po nakakahawa. Okay? And then the types of your genetic disorders, it can be congenital and then it can be somatic, but it is not infectious. Okay, so let us run down the types of your genetic disorders. We have the congenital. It is inherited at the birth. Next, we have your somatic. Natatandaan si somatic cells, yun yung mga cells na nagkakos ng cancer. It can arise during a person's life. It is responsible for the collective disease known as the cancer. Pag sinabing somatic cells, ang una-una agad dapat pumapasok sa isip nyo ay yung mga tinatawag na cancer. Next, gross chromosomal and point mutations occur in the somatic gene disease. So yung mga nagkakos ng cancer or the somatic cells, natatandaan ba sa DNA replication natin, nandun po sila na nangyayari sa ating mga telomerase, diba? Yung mga shortening, yung imbis na mag-copy siya sa normal genes or sa normal DNA, nagkakaroon ng mali or ng errors during the replication or doon sa kanyang telomerase or doon sa kanyang telomeres, and then nagiging uncontrolled na siya, and then ang nangyayari ay nagiging somatic cells na siya or what we call the cancers. Yun po ang pinoproblema natin when it comes to the chemotherapy. Kasi ang chemotherapy, it does not only kill the cancer cells, but it can also kill the healthy cells. Kasi nga, wala silang masyadong differentiation. Okay? Meron man, mahahalata mo man sa mga histopathology reports, but yung mechanism of the chemotherapy inside our body is it not only kills the cancer cells, but it also kills the healthy cells. So, pag nakagraduate kayo as medtechs or naging scientist kayo, sana meron tayo, okay, meron tayong magawang solution and treatment for the cancer cells na hindi na tina-target yung healthy cells, yung talagang cancer cells na lang yung kanyang ta-targetin. So going back to our discussion, these are the major categories of your genetic disorders. We have your single gene, monogenic, or Mendelian defects. We have your multifactorial disorders, the chromosomal disorders, the somatic cell gene defects, and your mitochondrial mutations. Again, balikan lang natin yung mutations natin. We have 3. The point mutation, okay, nagkakaroon lang ng changes in the one letter of the chromosome or the DNA base pairs. The loss of one letter sa frame shift mutation, and then the frame shift mutation pa din of your insertion. Okay? So, point mutation lang yung mga substitution. Pag deletion, it is under the frame shift mutation, and then frame shift mutation na din yung insertion. So point mutations, ito yung pinaka-most common among all the three. Point mutations affect single sites of your DNA. It can substitute one base for another. It can delete or add a single base. It can delete or add of a small number of bases. Okay, for example, if purine or pyrimidine substitute for itself, it is transition substitution. If purine substitute for pyrimidine or vice versa, transversion substitution. So ito lang yung tatlong usually or more common results of point mutations na nabanggit na natin, si silent, si missense, and si nonsense. Again, balikan lang natin, silent mutations due to the redundancy of the genetic code. Most point mutations are silent. They do not code for any amino acids. Silent mutations yung tawag doon. Pag missense mutations produces change in amino acid in protein but does not change the function of the protein. Next naman, yung nonsense mutation produces a stop codon, okay, in the midst of your mRNA transcript. So supposedly, ang ating mga transcription, it will end at a certain point. But for the nonsense mutations, nandun pa lang sa kalagitnaan, magsa-stop na. So maikli, mas maikli yung kanyang transcription process. And then, it can produce a non-functional protein. Okay? So these are the genetic orders na nabanggit natin kanina. For the Mendelian, it is inherited or pneumatic mutation, mutant allele or pair of mutant alleles at single locus, the clear pattern of inheritance, your autosomal or sex-linked dominant or recessive, and then the high risk to relatives. We have your chromosome. It can lose, gain, or abnormal rearrangement of one or more 46 chromosomes in the diploid cells or diploid cells. No clear pattern of inheritance, and then low risk siya to relatives. Next, yung multifactorial natin, it is common. And then the interaction between genes and environmental factors can contribute to the multifactorial genetic disorder. And then it is low risk to relatives. Next, for the mitochondrial genetic disorder, it is due to mutations in mitochondrial genome. Again, it is due to the mutations in mitochondrial genome. Matatandaan, meron po tayong DNA sa ating mga mitochondria, sa mga female, coming from the female line sa ating mga mother. It is transmitted through maternal line, like what we've mentioned, and it different pattern of inheritance from Mendelian disorders. Lastly is the somatic cells. Mutations in somatic cells, somatic event is not inherited and often give rise to tumor. So ang mabibigay natin additional information for the somatic cells is maraming mga environmental factors that can contribute to the production of your somatic cells. Hindi natin sinabi na it directly affects, but these factors lang, yung mga radicals natin, 'di ba, yung mga chemicals na pwedeng maka-apekto sa replication process and then makapag-produce ng uncontrolled cells na tinatawag nating somatic cells. So yung mga carcinogenic substances natin, it can affect, it is a risk, but walang science na nagsasabi na it directly makes somatic cells or it directly affects the cells that could lead to cancer. Parang ganon. Risk factors lamang po sila. So that concludes our discussion for your part 2 of the molecular biology and diagnostics modules 10 to 12. So thank you and God bless.